All right, thank you so much, Charlie, and thank you as well, Luke and Vinny. I appreciate this, and all your colleagues at Education USA. I'm a faculty member at Michigan State University, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the kind of work I do and so on as we go through the slides today. But I'm really glad that you've committed your time to learn a little bit more, uh, thinking about the PhD application process, at least as I can share from a faculty member's perspective. I must say, though, before beginning, that I hope you're well and your family and friends and colleagues are during this time. It's certainly unusual and a very unique time in our human history, and I wish continued wellness to you. Uh, the way today really sort of shaped my thinking is to imagine where you all are. And you're coming from different locations in a region of the world. But while you're coming from different locations, you're sharing a similar interest and a similar focus. And that is, how do I support people who want to apply to a PhD program? And how can I help them put forth the most competitive application? And for some of you who are students, it's how do I work with my Education USA colleagues so I can best put forward that application? So the things I share, I think, will really address a number of the questions that you have. But if there's something that I don't touch upon, certainly feel free to type that in the group chat, or we'll have some question and answer time at the end. To give you an idea of where I'm located, if you're not familiar, with Michigan State University. The state highlighted in green here on this slide is where I am, and the state is surrounded by water, the Great Lakes, and the little helmet there in the middle of Michigan, that's our logo or our symbol for the university. The background that I'll be drawing upon today in talking about applying for and developing a competitive application comes from over 30 years of reviewing PhD applications. And I've also been mentoring doctoral students during those years. So I've seen a fair number of people apply, go through their doctoral experience, and move on into various careers. I've also been speaking with prospective PhD students for the last couple of decades about, what are ways to prepare yourself to put forward the most competitive application. And during those years, I've been researching and teaching at 3 universities. So I've seen the application process from several different perspectives. And these are the symbols or logos from those universities. And Pittsburgh on the left is a private university. Connecticut's a public, and Michigan State is kind of in between, a little bit of both in some ways. So depending on the university universities you're thinking of applying to, have some experience in different types of institutions in the US. I've also been a visiting professor at a couple universities. You'll see here in the lower right corner at the University of California at Berkeley and at Columbia University. So geographically in different parts of the country too. West Coast and East Coast. I've also thought about the admissions process in a very personal way, in addition to the professional ways I just went through. My wife and I have 3 children, 2 of them in college right now. And so our dinner time discussion has really been focused on, the application process, albeit at the undergraduate level. We have a son who's a student athlete at the University of Michigan. He had hopes to try out for the Olympic trials for the Olympics in Tokyo, but of course that's all disappeared with the pandemic. But he's an economics major going into his senior year or 4th year of college. Our daughter is going into her 2nd year at Northwestern University in Chicago. And then we have a daughter who's in high school going into grade 11. And she's just moving into the application process for college. And so that's fresh in our minds again. So for all 3 of our kids, we've really thought about different universities, different parts of the application process in a very personal way. My wife's an academic also. who is now an independent scholar and educator and author. And of course, me in the family. That's a younger me, a little more hair on my head then. The context of doctoral studies in the US is worth saying a few words about. One is that there are over 1,000 universities that offer PhD degrees in the US. So there's a lot of choice. And the admissions process is unique at each university and often among departments in the same university. So given that there are over 1,000 universities with PhD degrees and everyone has their own application process, it's really important to study each process at each university. There's no one size fits all process. The admissions requirements also differ from one university and department to another. So you really have to pay attention to the unique aspects when it comes to requirements. And then finally, the admissions decisions at the doctoral level are made by professors. At the undergrad level, they're often staff, admissions staff who make those decisions. But if you're going to apply for a doctoral program, and most master's programs too, faculty make those decisions. So that's a little bit of background. When it comes to the process of applying, I think that Education USA has put forward a really smart and straightforward guide of 5 steps. And I know that if you're working with someone or will be, they'll talk about moving through these. And today, because of time, I'm just going to focus on one of them. And it's that middle step right there, step 3, that's about completing the application. And so the other steps are important, but I'm going to go deep and focused into this 3rd step here. And I'm going to take it and break it into down into 5 phases and say a little bit about each of those phases. So you'll see across the screen here the 5 phases of the application process. Starting on the left with personal work, I'll explain what each of these are, and then moving from left to right over to the interview work. So I lay this out in detail because many people want to jump to that 4th phase that's highlighted in yellow, the application work, and they want to start filling out the forms, either on paper or online. And the argument I'm going to put forward this morning is that these 3 phases that precede it are really important. And they're important because they help you develop some things that you can then say in the application. And if you jump right to this 4th phase, you don't have as much material to share that'll make your application competitive. So let me go through each of these, starting first with personal work on the far left. And for each of these phases, I'll pose a question and I'll give you a short answer to it, and then I'll explain the answer a little bit. So this personal work is really focused on self-assessing, or thinking about yourself, who you are, how you approach things, both in work and in life. So the question here is, how do I approach work? And this is an important question because graduate school for the PhD is 5 to 7 years. And you're going to do a lot of work during those 5 to 7 years. And it's going to be enjoyable, it's going to be exciting, and it's going to be contributing in valuable ways to the field, to humanity, and the world. But you want to make sure that you've thought through your approach to work on this. And the short answer to that question is, it's really helpful if you approach work as if it's a calling. And let me explain what I mean by calling there. So I have a colleague that's it's about an hour away from here at the University of Michigan. And he's done research on how people approach work differently. And he says people either approach work as it's a job, a career, or a calling. And depending on how they approach work, they're either more or less satisfied and they're more or less successful. And so approaching graduate school for the PhD, you want to make sure you're going into it with the right mindset for work. So what does it mean to approach work as if it's a job? Well, this approach is to see work as just a place to get money, source of income. And then you use that to do things elsewhere. Approaching work as a career is seeing work as a way to get ahead, to advance. And, maybe having a PhD sounds great. And, maybe some status or stature or promotion would be in store. To see work as a calling is to see what the work is as your life mission. It's like who you're supposed to become, and it's your identity. And so, as it turns out, my colleagues' research shows that the people who tend to be the most successful and those who are the most satisfied in their work are what? Those who approach work as a calling. And so going into doctoral studies, you want to set yourself up for the best possible experience. And you want to make sure that going into it, that the thing you're going into is more like your calling than like a career or job. So I'll move on. There's another question related to work, and that's just a general approach to life. And it turns out there's some research too that says how we generally approach life sets us up better for success in work and in things like doctoral studies. So it suggests that approaching life like you're a designer produces better outcomes. And so what does that mean? Well, there's a great book I recommend to everybody who's considering doctoral studies, and it's called Designing Your Life. It's written by a couple of colleagues at Stanford University. And they found years ago that these very talented, smart, capable students weren't really good at sort of planning out what they might do in life, where they might go and how they might approach it. And so they designed a course, which eventually became this book. And I really recommend this to lots of people to take a look at. But among its many points are that to approach life as a designer does is to have a bias for action. And that simply means to try stuff out, to experiment. If you think you might want to go in a certain direction for PhD studies, do some small steps ahead of time to see if that's really the direction you want to go. You got to test things out, and you sort of build your way forward and discover things, growing along the way. A second sort of principle in this book is that to approach life as a designer is to adopt an Odyssey living mindset. And that simply means to imagine different possible futures. If you're somebody who can say, yeah, I could go this direction or that direction, or maybe this one too, they all are connected in a way. That really opens you up and gives you flexibility so that you're not locked into something that's rigid and fixed. And I say that because often people come into doctoral studies thinking they want to do this one thing, and they discover that there are many more, there's an array of options that open up in front of them. And the more you're prepared for that and can imagine different possible futures, the easier it's going to be for you to move through doctoral studies and then on in your calling. So, talked a little bit about personal work. The question is, how do I approach work and life? And it turns out to approach life as a calling and life as a designer is likely going to move you more easily and successfully into doctoral studies. So we've just looked at personal work. I'm going to move on to the next area of preparation. That's professional work. The idea here is, how should I prepare for my PhD application? Are there things I can do in advance that will set me up to be more competitive? when I'm being reviewed for acceptance. And the answer to that question is that starting today, right now, you want to think and act like a professor. And I know that might sound a little strange. You may not even have visions of being a professor, but here's why I think it's advantageous to do this. And that is because the audience you're writing for in your application, in other words, the people who are going to read your application, are professors. And the more you can put yourself in their shoes and their mindset, you can think and act like them, the more favorably they will likely read your application. So you have to imagine a group of faculty, a group of professors sitting around a table, and we're all looking at application files and materials. And you be wondering, what are they thinking about? What are they valuing? What's important to them? And it turns out there are generally three things that faculty are looking for in doctoral applications. They're looking at potential for research on the left, teaching in the middle, and service on the right. And the more you can say about how you're beginning to move in these three areas, how you're beginning to grow, even before you enter a doctoral program, the more likely you're to be reviewed favorably. I've seen this many, many times in the committee meetings I've been a part of. So what I want to suggest are some things you could start doing today that in each of these three areas. And if you only do one of those three things, it'll be something you can talk about in your application and make you more competitive in the application process. So let me start with research. I have a little list here and I won't go through everything. You can look at all these later, or you could take a photo of them right now if you like. But in terms of research, if you can join a professional organization and then mention that in your application, that's looked at favorably. That somebody's already taken a first step. They know about who the professionals are in their field, and they've joined an organization, a society, or an association. And if you do that and then mention it in your application that you're a member, that'll catch the eye of those reading it. I'll mention just a couple of others. The second bullet point here is if you read the research journals, you don't have to read them deeply. Some things may not be that familiar to you yet, but if you just look at the abstracts, the summaries, they'll give you an idea of what are the issues, the ideas, and the people in the field. And you might be able to mention something briefly about that. I was reading in the journal, most recent issue of the journal about something. And that'll, again, draw the attention of the faculty sitting around the table. In the area of teaching, it's helpful if you have some teaching experience. Many people who go into doctoral studies end up as a teaching assistant. And if a faculty member sees in your application that you've done some kind of teaching, something related to teaching, then they'll see like, here's somebody we could maybe fit into this course or help out with this instructional area. And so I have some suggestions here that you can look over later. And then finally, service or volunteer work is looked at highly favorably. Are you willing to serve on committees as a student representative? Volunteer for organizations related to your field. And so there are some tips here as well. So the key point here is not that you do all the things that I've listed, but that maybe you pick one thing or two at the most in each of these three areas and begin them now so that you can talk about them in your application when you sit down and start filling it out. And that these things, these three areas are the types of areas that faculty are looking for potential in. And if you've already started to do them, that's to your competitive advantage. So that's the second area, professional work. The question again was, how should I prepare my PhD application? And you want to think and act like a professor, starting today. The third area of preparation is program work. The question here is, how do I find the a PhD program in the US that's going to work out for me? And, uh, and the short answer is you want to do research. You need to do homework to find out what is a good fit. And that last word there, fit, it's a short word, only 3 letters, but it's really a key word that has a rich, large meaning. And you'll probably hear your Education USA advisors talk about it, fit. And by it, I'm meaning that fit is finding a match, a suitable or program, suitable, a compatible partner for doing my studies. Because you're going to be at a place for 5 to 7 years, and you want to make sure that it's got some good things that fit with who you are and where you want to go. To find a good fit is something I often hear. How do I find it? And there are a number of steps in this process, and most people want to start with the rankings of universities, both national or international. I'm really cautious about this. I'm not so sure that the rankings help you find the best fit. And so if you're going to use them, I'm going to show you how to use them judiciously. And to do that, I'll give you an example here. U.S. News and World Report ranks all the universities and departments and programs in the U.S. And it can be a tool that you can use judiciously to find the stronger programs in an area you might be interested in. So I'm going to use 2 examples. Let's say engineering is an interest of yours, industrial engineering. And if you go on this website, you'll find here a list of, from 1 to 219 of the engineering schools. And you'll see that MIT and Stanford and Cal Berkeley are the top 3. Now, given your interest in engineering, it may be that one of these schools could be a good fit or it could not. You can't really tell yet. These rankings here are general rankings for this year, and they could change next year. So the way to be judicious is over on the left here, there's a little drop-down menu. It says all specialties. If you click on that, and then you select industrial engineering, you'll see the rankings for that specialty area, for that program, and that's over on the right of your screen. You'll see the best in industrial engineering programs. And you'll see that they're Georgia Tech, University of Michigan, and Northwestern. And to me, the most noticeable thing here is that these top 3 are not the top 3 over here overall. So it's possible with your interest in industrial engineering, if that's it, you could go to MIT, get a great education, but they may not have the program or the people that's really going to fit with what you want to do. So that's why using this little drop-down menu here can be a good first step in finding a program that is in your area of interest. I'll pick an area from the social sciences just to make this point a little more solidly. Notice Harvard, Penn, and Stanford are the top 3 in education. If you go to the drop-down menu over here, click on it, and you're interested in educational research, let's say in high schools, grades 9 through 12. Notice over on the right here, Michigan State, Teachers College in New York City, and University of Michigan are the top 3. Note that these top 3 in this specialty area are not at all the same as the overall area over here on the left. So again, the point is you want to really do your homework and use this tool judiciously to begin to help you specialty programs that fit with the direction you'd like to go in. Once you have that list of programs that look like they might be a good fit, you want to list them out here and begin to do further homework on them. So tell you a little story here about myself. When I was looking to go to graduate school and earn a PhD, I applied to a number of programs, applied to Harvard, Stanford, Berkeley, UCLA, Minnesota, and Illinois. And I just prayed I could get into one. That, that's that was my goal. Just let me get into one. And amazingly, I got into all six, and I couldn't believe it. And I realized at that moment that I had a problem. How was I going to decide? I thought the decision would be made for me if I could just get into one. So I had more homework to do. And so here's the additional homework that I began and that you can do too. And that is to begin to engage in a series of things. And it's really important to talk with current and former doctoral students in each of the programs that you think might be a good fit. Years ago when I was doing this, that meant I had to travel a little bit and cross paths with these current and former doctoral students. But today it's much easier online. And you can just reach out through social media. Often our secretaries at the university get calls and somebody says, hey, I'm thinking about your program. Could you recommend a couple students that could reach out to me? Here's my email. And this is where you find out the best information about a program. Just talk to former and current students. Sometimes faculty too. You can follow them and students on social media. And some people try to email a faculty member and talk with them. And I think that's great as well. It helps give you a fuller picture. Certainly study, look for some of the studies that have been done by faculty in the program so you know about the kind of work they're doing. And you want to look at the website and the biographies. The overall idea is you want to help understand the culture of each particular PhD program and think about, is that a place I could call home for 5 to 7 years? Are those the kind of people that could really help develop my skills and sharpen my knowledge? While you're doing those things, you want to note things like, do the faculty publish with their doctoral students? This is really important. It's probably one of the key things to think about if you want to become a professor yourself, because you need that kind of mentoring and help. You don't want to go and just take a bunch of courses. You want to work with people who are really good at doing research and publishing it. Do they co-present at conferences? And I was so fortunate to have a faculty advisor who from day one said, let's start presenting work that we're doing together. And I learned a tremendous amount from him about how to share research in academic settings. Are there regular special seminars that are held on a regular basis? And I know at my university, we have people coming through all the time from all over the world, and it's really exciting, and it makes for a really vibrant program for our faculty and doctoral students. And so I'm going to just mention a few other things here. You also want to find out what are the milestones, this last point here. What are the important things you have to do as you move through your program? So that's the third preparation area, the program work. How do I find a PhD program? And the answer is you got to do research and find a good fit. And it doesn't just jump out at you. You have to go after it. You have to pursue it. Like you really, really want this. So if you've done these three areas on the left, you've done the personal, professional, and program work, then when you sit down to fill out the application, you got some fantastic things to say. You're going to be much more competitive, and you're going to feel great about the things you're writing down. You'll have a compelling and convincing case. So how should I prepare my PhD application? Well, you want to prepare it like you're a marketer or you're a salesperson. You're really trying to put the best parts of you forward and sell yourself as a potential doctoral student. Say, these are the things I've begun to do, and these are the goals that I have. And I think your program is the best fit for me for these reasons. So you got to think like a marketer in all the materials you're submitting. These are typically the things that make up an application package. I'm not going to go through all these. I have another webinar that I do sometimes that goes through these in more detail. But just generally, you want to show your commitment that you've already begun doing some things in research, teaching, and service that move you in the direction that their program is about. You're trying to be really persuasive, not in an over-the-top way, but just in a steady, strong way that I am ready for this. You know, I've begun doing things, and I have fairly clear goals. Because the committee is trying to find out, are you a good bet? Are you a good fit? You know, as a faculty member, we have limited resources and we can only accept so many students. And so we're trying to see who's going to be the best bet and fit in our program. And then finally, you want to showcase your fit. You want to put that out there, that you understand their program, what kinds of work their faculty do, what kind of courses they have, and how you're going to be sort of the person that makes the best connection with who they are and who you are. So I'm going to mention just a couple of things here. I'm going to focus on this second area, number 2, the personal statement. And I just want to say that this is the place you really want to showcase that professional work you've done. Those 3 areas of work that are in preparation, show them here in the application. You want to do that by explaining how the things you've done. If you see somebody who looks like a possible advisor, then you want to mention that in your personal statement. And I know as a committee member sitting around the table, to me that says this person has really taken the time to find out who's the best fit and who they would likely be able to work with in our program. They have a more intimate knowledge, and I can't help but view it more favorably. The other area of the application work I just want to briefly mention are the reference letters. These need to be written by academic mentors, not friends or family or other folks who could speak about character. Those can be good, but what a committee sitting around the table reading your application want to know is what's your potential for academic work. So if you have 3 letters, which is common, by academic mentors, professors, research people you've worked with, then you have a more competitive application. You want them to focus on your academic abilities and potential. Ideally, if they can tailor their letter to each program, that's best. It's been really hard at times when I read through generic reference letters that could have been written for any university. If it looks like somebody's really customized it and has an understanding of our program, and that's where you can be helpful with your reference letter writers, give them some background and explain your suitability for admission. So those are just a couple of things to say about application work. The question again was, how should I prepare for the application? And you really need to prepare like you're a marketer, like you're trying to put your best foot forward and sell the assets that you're going to bring coming to the program. The final area is the interview work. And commonly nowadays, interviews are a part of the application process. If we read the paperwork and see potential, then we want to talk with you. We want to get to know you a little bit more in a live situation. So you want to approach this interview like it's a conversation. Some people tend to see these as an interrogation, like they're going to be asked a number of hard, difficult, challenging questions. But generally, these are more like conversations. We just want you to just talk informally, hear a little bit more about you, your life, some of the things you said in your application materials. So it's not high pressure. It's more like get to know you. Some things to help are to just anticipate questions you might be asked. So you want to thumb through the materials you submitted, think about what might they ask me more about. You want to prepare some questions ahead of time that you want to ask them. and you really want to study the materials about their program. I've been on a few of these interviews when someone clearly didn't know much about our program at all. And that was quite embarrassing. And I really felt for them at that point. But you want to sort of understand like what the things you're going to have to do as you move through the doctoral program. And then clearly you want to rehearse and practice. I recommend it to others that you just find a place where you're alone and just talk out loud. Imagine you're being interviewed and say things that you would like to say in response to questions you anticipate. So you want to do this so you feel natural and more comfortable. You really got to put work into this, as this last point suggests. In fact, I argue as much work as you put into your materials, because the interview in the end is the make or break point in the decision-making process. You've passed all the paperwork part of it, and if they interview you, this is the point where they're trying to make final decisions. So those are the 5 phases of the PhD application process. Just a few final thoughts here. My advice is to take this really broad view of the application process, to see it as 5 phases, starting on the left and going all the way to the right. You also want to start the application process early. Some people say 4 to 6 months, others say 7 to 9. I really advocate about a year in advance is ideal, because to do some of the preparation work that really sets you up for the most competitive application, you need time. You need the time to do some things, get them set up and to follow through on them. And then finally, you've got to really invest in this. It's not something that you can just sort of do halfway, but you want to work with your Education USA advisor and others who are also applying, and really support each other and take seriously the information and feedback that you get. And so that when you follow through on it, that application you submit is just so strong and you're feeling great about it. So those are the 5 phases here. You'll be able to access these at a later time. I do have a few things if I could share about the university where I work, and this might shed a little more light on those 5 phases. I'm at Michigan State University. I showed you already where it's located. I'm going to skip a few slides here and just tell you that it's our university is geographically large. It's 3 kilometers by 8 kilometers. And so if you were to try and walk from one end to the other, it would take you about an hour. But most people use other modes of transportation to get around. And doctoral students inevitably, make use of these as they move about life and their studies. We have about over 50,000 students on campus who come from 141 countries. And so we're a university that's very experienced in working with prospective doctoral students who come to study. We're primarily a research university, and in the US, that means we're an AAU university. We're also what's called a land grant university, and that means our research tends to be very practical and applied, and we're really focused on bettering the human condition. We really want to serve the world through the work that we do as scholars and with our students. We have 118 PhD programs, lots of different areas. And you can find those. We have a nice little tool on our website here that allow you to search for different parts of the university and find out the programs that might be a good fit for you. I'm in the College of Education and the Social Sciences. We're one of the top colleges in the country. In fact, for the last 25 years, we've been ranked, now it's 26 years, we've been ranked #1 in the US and in our area. And worldwide, at least according to the Shanghai rankings, right now we're ranked #1, followed by Harvard and then our neighbor, University of Michigan. So while rankings aren't the full story, they indicate strength in some areas, and you'll want to search further to see if there's possibly a good fit if educational research is your interest. I'm going to skip a couple more slides here. just generally, you want to think about a university um, and other things they offer besides the academics. Here at Michigan State, we have an international student office that helps with visas and so on. And you want to make sure the university has a good, strong office for doing this. We have a number of research centers. Our Asian Research Center is bringing people through all the time to talk about research going on in Asia, partnering with Asia, and so on. We also have student organizations. For example, here the Malay students have a Facebook page, and you can see, I think there are about 900 some current and former students who are linked to this page. And this is the Indonesian Student Association. So students from different parts of the world, different nations, get together on campus, and they have socials, support for each other, and so on. Our president is very active in the world. Here, he's just on the cover of a recent journal talking about Michigan State. And so you want to get to know the leadership a little bit of these different universities. And then finally, you want to think about after your PhD, how are you going to get help finding work? And we have an International Career Services Center that can help with that and give good guidance. So I'll stop there, and I'm glad to respond to any questions. I know I moved along at a fairly brisk pace, and so there are probably some things that I missed or that you thought of in addition.
Dr. Hartman, this is Charles. Thank you so much for the really informative presentation, and also for going nice and slow through the steps. That really does allow our advisors to be able to have a good model for how to advise students when they come into the center. And I think that your presentation, once we share it, will be extremely helpful. I do want to open it up to questions for our advisors or the students on the call today. We'll give priority for anyone who is brave enough to unmute your mic or show your face on camera to ask a question. But if not, we do have quite a few questions that came through in the chat, which I will try to moderate over to Dr. Hartman. But to start off, any advisors or students that would like to ask a question live?
Hey Charlie, Samantha here from EduSA Australia, Melbourne.
Hi, Samantha. Samantha, I think we're just a little bit difficulty hearing you. If you can just pull your mic a little bit closer, and then I think it should be okay.
All right, let's try and do that, and I'll try and increase my volume at the same time. Is that better?
That's perfect.
Very good, thank you.
Dr. Hartman, thanks for being with us today. I think the pathway to PhD probably scares me as an advisor a little bit more. And we certainly know about finding the best fit at an institution. The couple of things that I'd like to ask, we've always recommended students try and find supervisors at those programs that they approach first before actually applying for a PhD. But in kind of listening to you today, I'm not sure if that's obviously a requirement. Is that fair for me to assume?
When you say find a supervisor, you're referring to an academic advisor, a professor?
Yeah, for your PhD supervisor. That's right.
Yeah. Well, it's going to vary quite a bit based on the program, the field, the institution, the personality. My experience is in the social sciences, and we generally, when I hear conversations, we want to get to know someone, interact with them a little bit in advance, so we can initially kind of size up is the direction they want to go in likely to be a good fit with our program. And if it is, then we can kind of provide some gentle and general direction as they begin to pull their materials together. But if not, we want to help point them to places that might be a better fit. I know in my work, every week or so I'm getting inquiries, and often I'll say, there's a great person at University of Kansas that's going to be a better fit for you, or look at these 3 programs in Alabama, Washington, and Iowa. And I would much rather that they have a better fit, some place that's going to be right for them, than to just shut the conversation down with them, or to sort of give them the misconception that we would be the best fit when we wouldn't be.
Mm.
So,
Dr. Hartman, you also mentioned that you have a certain amount of spots that you guys know you need to fill on an annual basis.
mhm.
Are those spots ever advertised so students know that there's PhD seats available for any coming year?
Well, I
Or
don't
is it?
think, I don't think they're put on a website
Mm,
or anything like that, or even shared generally. It varies from year to year depending on funding and how well departments and faculty have performed in the previous year or two, and that affects available funding.
yeah.
But sometimes a coordinator of a program will be able to say, in general, we're accepting 7 people per year, and that'll at least give you a rough idea. But some people aren't willing to share that information. So,
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Hartman. I was also very lucky to be part of the Level 2 training group last year, and Michigan State were our hosts. So,
great.
So go green, go white. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. I do want to make sure that we ask a student question that came in a little bit earlier in the presentation. And a student that has tuned in with us today asked, how important are publications in the PhD application? And based on your experience, did you have any publications before you applied for your PhD?
So I did not have a publication. I had written a master's thesis. That's not really technically a formal publication, but it does have committee review. But as far as the application process goes, it's not a requirement. Um, it is probably the gold standard if someone happens to have a publication in a peer-reviewed journal. That means it's the best possible thing you could have to symbolically show that you've really moved in this direction and are really serious about academic study in the direction you want to go. There are sort of lesser scholarly things you could do than publishing that would carry strong weight and make you competitive. And one would be just being a member of a research team. Even though that role might be small, that shows that you're reaching out and connecting and are learning some things. And the publication wouldn't matter so much that as you're being involved in the activity of doing research and around people who are talking and thinking and doing the things that you would be doing in graduate school. That's a good question.
Thank you, Dr. Hartman. We actually have quite a few questions coming in on the chat. So if anyone would like to jump in to ask a live question, feel free after this. But just to keep it rolling, I will ask Dr. Hartman a question from Mohammed Iqbal, our Education USA advisor in Indonesia. Iqbal would like to ask, how do students get an assistantship for a doctoral program? What is the approach like?
It varies, again, from program to program and university to university. But generally, if someone is accepted into a program, a doctoral program, there is some kind of support provided, especially at the top 60 research universities. So I can speak from my own program. We fully fund doctoral students for 5 years. We're a 5-year doctoral program. And the way to access that funding is to be accepted. And most other doctoral programs are similar to that. The assistantships range from a research assistantship to a teaching assistantship to an administrative assistantship. And what percentage of the openings in those 3 areas vary from year to year. So it could be that somebody's application is very strong and competitive, but if they don't have any prior teaching-like experience, and they're looking for people who can teach in their doctoral program, they may get squeezed out of being accepted that year because there simply isn't a good match between the need for teaching and someone who hasn't done teaching-like experience. So, it's really a matter of trying to round your skill set out so that you have some things you can say in terms of research, teaching, and service, so that they can look at the different dimensions of your emerging interest and experience and see that you could fit in a number of places when it comes to an assistantship.
Thank you, Dr. Hartman. We have a few questions coming in from the Philippines. Would our Education USA advisor, Christine, like to ask her questions on camera?
Yeah, sure.
Hi,
I
Christine.
can see the smile too. Hi, thank you for the very informative session. It was really helpful. First, I wanted to ask, what's the best way to determine if a PhD program is a good fit for a student? Because most of the time, we get questions where students are asking, does it make sense for me financially? Is there any information I'm missing from the school website? So do you have general tips on how we can go about navigating finding financial aid or grants other than the public information already available on the website?
So, financial aid information sometimes is hard to come by. There is often general information online. If you can talk to somebody, that's a way to get finer grained information about what's available, whether it be a scholarship, fellowship, or some kind of assistantship. Generally, as I said, if you're accepted, there's support that comes along with it at the doctoral level. So, it's a matter of just trying to dig and learn as much as you can. My experience is that some people come at this putting priority first on the cost. And I've learned that that's probably not the thing to prioritize, the cost, because at the doctoral level, if you're accepted, then the money usually follows. Not always, but at least up until the pandemic, that's been the model of how things have worked. If I get a research grant for a study I'm going to be doing, I'm probably going to hire 2 doctoral students to work with me over a few years. And so I'll have funding for 2 people that we admit who want to do research in the area of my interest. And other faculty are doing the same thing. And so we have research assistantships, we have courses we need help teaching, and we want to support those who want to be the next generation of faculty and universities or who are working in corporate America or the world.
And Christine, I think you bring up another good question about prospective students going straight into a PhD program and advisable. And Dr. Hartman, I believe we have other questions from our advising cohort that are similar to this. Do you have advice on if it's advisable to go straight into a PhD program? I know that part of your presentation was talking about the work experience, and that is an important step of the application. Any comment on that?
Yeah, just a couple of things. One is that it depends on the field again. A lot of this is contingent on the area you're going into. So in my area, in the area of educational research, we like people to have some kind of experience in schools or in informal teaching and learning settings. A rule of thumb for us is like 3 years or more. And we generally don't look at applications unless somebody has that kind of experience. They're much better doctoral students if they have some experience like that. But in other fields, that kind of experience really isn't a priority. That moving from the undergraduate directly into a master's and a PhD makes a lot of sense. And so this is where you're doing homework on your field comes into play. You have to talk to people because it's going to be so discipline or field specific, and it might even be program specific. One engineering program might want experience, and another one, it doesn't matter if you have it or not. And so as much as you can from afar, virtually, you want to try and find out some of this kind of information.
Thank you. Christine, you had a follow-up question on your financial aid?
Yeah, just a really quick one. So if the prospective student reaches out to the department, should they be vocal about their need for a grant and so on? Or should they wait until they're further into their discussion with these departments?
Well, I think it's okay to mention it in your application materials. That you're seeking an assistantship or some scholarship. You can certainly ask about it too if you happen to be talking with fellow current student or a faculty member or maybe even the department secretary. But I think the time to really get into details is if there's an acceptance. And so many of the students we see these days are applying to several programs. And some of them are a bit like professional athletes or prospective college athletes, and that they'll begin to say, well, if I'm going to come here, I need this, and they're offering me this over there at this other university. So they becomes a bit of a negotiation and bargaining game to kind of attract them to come to study with us. And so I think later is better to bring up the details of financial need.
Thank you, Dr. Hartman. Vinny, you noted that you have a question that kind of combines some of the questions that we're getting on the chat. Over to you.
Yes, actually, so Samantha had a question in there, and I wanted to make sure that we brought that up. So a lot of people think that the path to a PhD starts with a bachelor's and then goes to a master's degree, but there are some programs where a student can go directly into a PhD, or there's a pathway. So could you talk about some of those? I mean, I know it varies from field to field, but also in the case that a student wants to pursue a PhD directly and just has a bachelor's degree, what are the qualifications and what kinds of things would you recommend they prepare in that case when they don't have a master's degree and the publications and such?
Sure, yeah. Well, at the undergraduate level, probably not publishing, but can certainly be engaged in research. Every year at Michigan State, we have about 3,000 undergraduates who engage in research with professors and put on a conference on campus that helps them showcase the work they've done. And they get terrific mentoring, and it's something that they can talk about then if they are going directly on to a PhD. So that would be the thing I would advocate, is in the undergraduate years, be doing research, either in a course, as part of a course, or independent of a course. Maybe there's a professor you take a course from at the undergrad level, and you realize they have a research team or a research center that they're working in, and you volunteer to help out with some work that they're doing. And I think that's how you can prepare at the undergrad level to begin to have something to say if you go on directly to the doctorate. And incidentally, that same thinking works at the master's level. You want to be doing some things research-wise that you can talk about then when you apply for a doctoral program.
Thank you.
Dr. Hartman, I know we are running out of time, and you were also very gracious for your time since it's getting quite late by you. We just want to finish with two final questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
We have a question from Brunei, from our advisor, Myra. What makes a good PhD personal statement? How can a student stand out from the rest?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, I have a webinar that focuses just on the personal statement. And at a general level, I think what makes a statement stand out is to respond directly to the prompt that university puts out for you to write about. I've read many personal statements that were generic or general and didn't really talk about the things we want to know specifically in a personal statement. If you can imagine faculty looking at a dozen personal statements and we're trying to sort of compare and contrast them, there are certain kinds of information that we want to know for each applicant. And if someone has written about something completely different than what we asked them to write about, then we don't have a basis for making a decision on them. So the first point is to respond directly to the prompt that they want you to write about in your personal statement. Include each aspect or element that they ask for. And then secondly, the other standout thing is to have lived the experiences that are going to speak through your personal statement. So if you've begun reading in the journals a little bit, kind of thumbing through them, noticing issues, ideas, and people, you want to mention that in your personal statement. I know that I'm always pleasantly perking up when I see that somebody has been in the literature, the research literature, and they're not in a doctoral program. And I go, this person has already taken a step in the direction that we want them to move in further if they come into our program. Or if they have volunteered to help run a conference or served on some committee at the university level or in the community that's related to the field they want to move in, that gets attention. So you want to have lived a little bit in the ways that are possible for you and your circumstances. Lived some things that feed in well, that align well with the way that doctoral studies will move you further.
Thank you, Dr. Hartman. And our last question for this session, and thank you to everyone who has submitted a question thus far. I believe we got to most, if not all of them. This question is coming from Lilis, who is our Education USA advisor in Indonesia. In terms of the interview, is it always one-on-one, or can it be a group interview involving more than one applicant?
Yeah, it varies on institution. The programs that I'm a part of do one-on-one interviews. They'll often be 2 faculty and 1 student, but other programs across the university will have small groups with 1 or 2 faculty members, small groups of prospective students, and they too try and make them conversational. So if you reach that point in the application process, you want to you want to find out as best you can what the situation will be, so that you in your mind can envision what it will be like. And I'm an advocate of rehearsal, of practicing. And so to the extent you can simulate that, what that would be like, having several people and having a conversation about something related to the field you want to go into, that's good practice. And that'll help you feel more relaxed, and it'll make things clearer and sharper in your mind if they come up in the conversation. You will have gone through it already.
Okay, we are very over time at this point. So I just want to once again thank Doug. That was really great to be able to go through the PhD application process and be able to share your expertise and insight to not only our Education USA advisors, but also to the students that joined in today. One of the questions was, will we be able to share this recording, and can our advisors share the recording with students? And as long as Doug is okay with that, I think we can be sure that this presentation is permissible to share with students as they come into the center and engage with our advisors. So thank you, Doug, for that. If there's any follow-up questions, advisors can feel free to reach out to your REAC, and we can reach out to Doug directly to see if we can get any follow-up to your questions. But also, Doug, do you have a screen with your email on it? If not, we can share it with advisors afterwards.
Yeah, well, I don't have it on the screen, but you're welcome to share it. That would be fine.
Okay, perfect. So once again, thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Hartman. We really do appreciate it on behalf of Vinny, Luke, myself as the REACs, and all of our Education USA advisors, we really do appreciate you taking the time. And I hope that we didn't keep you up too late for this session today.
I'm glad to do so. And I just want to say thank you to all the Education USA advisors. Having been at NAFSA as a relative newbie, I just so admire the work you do and the commitment you have to supporting people who have life goals that are ambitious and they're full of big dreams. And you guys do fantastic work and important work. Thanks.
Thank you so much. To everyone, this webinar is now over. You can log off and we will be able to send the presentation as soon as we can edit it and get it up to the shared folder. So thank you to everyone and have a good day, good evening, good night.